All right, buckle up, everyone, because today we are diving headfirst into the whirlwind that was Bitcoin in early March 2025.
Yeah, get ready for some twists and turns.
Seriously, we've got a whole stack of news here, and it's not just the usual, like, oh, Bitcoin went up, Bitcoin went down. This time, we're talking presidential orders, a digital Fort Knox. Even Goldman Sachs is getting involved.
It's definitely been a month for Bitcoin making headlines.
For sure. So, to kick things off, let's talk about the big news. President Trump signed an executive order on March 7th to create a U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve.
Wow, a Bitcoin reserve.
Yep, you heard that right. And here's the thing. It's not taxpayer money funding this.
Really? Where's it coming from then?
It's going to be filled with, get this, about 200,000 Bitcoins.
That's a lot of Bitcoin.
It is. And it all came from, well, criminal activities, seized assets.
So, like, they confiscated it.
Exactly, and they're holding on to it, calling it a digital Fort Knox, which is a pretty bold statement, don't you think?
It is. I mean, that's quite the comparison. Fort Knox is like the ultimate symbol of security and value.
Right, so it's a huge signal that they're starting to see Bitcoin as like a legitimate store of value, almost like a digital gold reserve.
It makes you wonder what this could mean for the future of the U.S. dollar.
Yeah, it's a big question for sure. And how are other countries going to react to this? Will they follow suit?
It's interesting to think about, especially with all the talk about a multi-chain future. Some people believe various cryptocurrencies will play a role in the future, while others think Bitcoin will stay on top.
Yeah, that's a whole other debate. And actually, that reminds me, Trump initially hinted that he might include other cryptos in the reserve, too.
Oh, really? Like Ethereum?
Yeah, Ethereum, XRP, a few others. But in the end, he went Bitcoin only.
I bet that sparked some strong reactions.
Definitely. Ripple's CEO, for example, he was all for multi-chain approach, argued it would be more inclusive, boost innovation.
That makes sense, coming from Ripple.
Right. But then you had Coinbase, the big exchange. They were pushing for Bitcoin only, said Bitcoin's the most decentralized, the most secure.
So even in the crypto world, there's no clear consensus. Makes you wonder what the right move is.
That's for sure. But okay, let's shift gears a bit. How did all this presidential Bitcoin action impact the market? Because we all know crypto can be a bit volatile.
Oh yeah, things can change quickly.
Understatement of the year. So on the day of the crypto summit, which Trump hosted, by the way, and big names like Coinbase and Ripple were there, Bitcoin's price shot up, past $90,000.
That's a big jump. The summit must have created a lot of buzz.
It did. The Bitcoin reserve news, the general excitement, it all drove demand way up.
So basic economics, right? More demand, higher price.
Yep, exactly. But of course, it doesn't end there, does it?
You know, it never does with Bitcoin. There's always another twist.
So what happened?
Well, when it became clear that the U.S. wasn't actually planning to buy more Bitcoin, just hold on to what they seized, the market kind of cooled down.
Ah, so the initial hype died down a bit.
Yeah. The price dropped about 6%, landed around $86,175. Still a lot, but shows how sensitive things are to news and expectations.
That's a good reminder to never get too comfortable in the crypto world.
Definitely. But despite that dip, Bitcoin is still performing well overall. Way up compared to before the election.
Yeah, like 25% up, right.
Right. Shows there's still strong confidence in its future. Which, speaking of, brings us to another interesting development. Goldman Sachs just bought a huge chunk of Bitcoin ETFs.
Wait, Goldman Sachs, the Wall Street giant, they're in on Bitcoin now.
They are. About $1.5 billion worth.
Whoa, that's a serious investment. This feels like a major shift. For years, big institutions were hesitant to touch Bitcoin.
Yeah, they saw it as too risky, too volatile. But this move by Goldman Sachs could change everything. It's like they're saying, hey, we believe in this. We're putting our money where our mouth is.
That's massive. $1.5 billion, that's not just dipping their toes in the water. And for those who might not be familiar, what exactly are ETFs?
So ETFs, or exchange-traded funds, they're basically like baskets of assets traded on the stock market. In this case, Goldman Sachs bought Bitcoin ETFs, which means they're betting on Bitcoin's price without actually owning the coins themselves.
So it's a way to get exposure to Bitcoin without, like, dealing with the whole buying and storing process.
Exactly. And it allows investors to diversify their portfolios, potentially profit from Bitcoin's growth without all the technical stuff.
Interesting. It seems like even the most established players are waking up to Bitcoin's potential. This all begs the question, what does this mean for the average investor? Is it time to jump on the bandwagon?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Does this move by Goldman Sachs validate Bitcoin as a solid investment, or is it just a big gamble by a Wall Street giant?
It's something for everyone listening to think about. I mean, we've covered a lot already today. Presidential orders, market swings, Wall Street getting in on the action. It's been a wild ride, and we're just getting started. Okay, so we've talked about how the government and even Wall Street are looking at Bitcoin. But what about the average person? Like, where do the experts think this is all headed?
Well, some of these predictions from market analysts are pretty wild. A lot of them are really bullish on Bitcoin's future,
Billish, meaning
meaning they think it's going to go up, way up. Some are even saying it could hit $200,000 by the end of 2025.
$200,000. That's a huge jump from where it is now.
It is, but that's not all. For the long term, some forecasts are even more optimistic,
More optimistic. How much more?
like try $500,000 by 2030. Some even think it could go higher than that.
Those are some pretty eye-popping numbers. But what's driving all this optimism? Is it all just hype? Or is there something concrete behind these predictions?
It's not just hype. There are some key factors at play here. One big one is that institutional adoption we've been talking about. When you have major players like Goldman Sachs stepping in, it kind of legitimizes the whole thing.
Right, like it gives other big institutions the confidence to jump in, too.
Exactly. And that can create this sort of snowball effect.
Yeah.
More investors, more demand, and that pushes the price up.
Makes sense. But hold on, haven't we also been talking about how volatile Bitcoin is? Doesn't that make these predictions a little risky, even with all this institutional interest?
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin is known for its price swings. And even with these optimistic forecasts, the analysts acknowledge that it's probably going to keep being a bit of a roller coaster.
Okay, so not exactly a smooth ride to $500,000.
Yeah, I mean, just look at what happened this month. We saw Bitcoin hit over $109,000 after that crypto summit, but then it dropped back down to the mid-80,000s.
So it sounds like anyone investing in Bitcoin better be prepared for some serious ups and downs. Maybe just buckle up and try not to check the price every 5 minutes.
That's probably a good strategy, yeah. It's important to remember that investing in crypto, especially Bitcoin, it comes with risks. The market is still pretty new, and there are a lot of factors that can influence it, like regulation, technology, even just like people's feelings about it.
Right, the whole sentiment thing. Speaking of which, what do you make of this whole digital gold narrative surrounding Bitcoin? Is that a fair comparison?
It's an interesting analogy. Both Bitcoin and gold have a limited supply, which is something a lot of people point to when they're talking about their value. And some folks argue that Bitcoin is like a more modern version of gold.
More modern in what way?
Well, they say it's more portable, you can divide it up more easily, that kind of thing.
So it's like a better store of value for the digital age?
That's the idea, yeah. They see it as a hedge against inflation, like a safe haven when the economy gets shaky.
So it's kind of like a digital Fort Knox, just like what they're calling the U.S. Bitcoin Reserve. But unlike Fort Knox, it's not tied to any one country.
Right. That's a key point. Bitcoin is decentralized. It operates on a global network. It's a totally different beast from traditional financial systems.
So basically, you're saying that in a world where governments can print money whenever they want and potentially devalue their own currencies, Bitcoin offers a way out, like a way to protect yourself from those risks.
That's the thinking behind it, yeah. But it's important to remember that Bitcoin is still a pretty new asset class. There are still a lot of questions about its long-term value, concerns about security, and even the potential for manipulation.
It's like any new technology or invention. It has the potential to be revolutionary, but there are always challenges and uncertainties.
For sure. It's definitely not a guaranteed path to getting rich, and anyone investing in it needs to be aware of both the potential and the risks.
Okay, so we've got these bullish predictions, this whole digital gold story, and more big players getting involved. But where does that leave the average person who might be thinking about getting into Bitcoin?
That's a great question. I think the most important thing is to really do your research. Don't just jump in because everyone else is doing it.
Right, understand what you're getting into.
Exactly. Take some time to learn how it all works, the history, the potential, but also the risks.
Treat it like an experiment, right? And definitely don't put all your eggs in one basket, especially in a market like this.
Yeah, good advice. And don't be afraid to ask questions. There are tons of online communities and forums where you can connect with experienced investors and learn from them.
That's a great tip. The crypto community is usually pretty helpful and welcoming. So as we wrap up our look at Bitcoin's wild ride in March, what's the main takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I think the big takeaway is that we're at a really interesting point in the history of finance. Bitcoin isn't just some fringe thing anymore. It's becoming a major player. We're seeing it influence everything from government policy to Wall Street. It's something we all need to pay attention to.
Yeah, it's like we're watching a financial revolution unfold right in front of us. Exciting and a little bit scary all at the same time.
Definitely.
So, for those listening who might be feeling a little overwhelmed by it all, what's one question they should be thinking about as they explore the world of Bitcoin?
I'd say think about how this growing adoption of Bitcoin by governments and big institutions might change our traditional financial systems.
Mm.
Will we see a move towards a more decentralized digital world, or will the old systems adapt and figure out a way to coexist with crypto?
That's a great question. It's like we're at a crossroads, and the path we choose now will shape the future of finance for years to come. So, to everyone listening, keep learning, stay curious, and don't be afraid to keep exploring the world of Bitcoin and beyond. Who knows what exciting developments next month's deep dive will uncover. Until then, happy investing, or at least happy learning. So it sounds like the crypto world can be a bit overwhelming for those just starting out. There's a lot to learn, a lot to consider, but for those who are ready to take the plunge, what are some resources or strategies they can use to make informed decisions?
Well, there's definitely no shortage of information out there. Reputable online publications, industry blogs, podcasts like this one, they can all be valuable resources.
Right. Diversify your sources. Don't just rely on one website or one influencer.
Exactly. Get a range of perspectives so you can form a well-rounded understanding. And don't be afraid to go a bit deeper, like learn about the technical stuff.
The technical stuff.
Yeah, like blockchain technology, how transactions actually work, the different types of wallets. That can give you a much better grasp of the whole infrastructure behind Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies.
It's like anything, right? The more you understand how it works, the better choices you can make. But with so much information out there, it can be hard to even know where to start. What advice would you give to someone who's just beginning their crypto journey?
I would say start small and take your time. There's no need to rush into anything. Begin by investing an amount you're comfortable losing.
That's a good point. Treat it like an experiment.
Exactly. Don't go putting all your eggs in one basket, especially in a market as volatile as this, and don't be afraid to ask questions. There are so many online communities and forums where you can connect with people who have been doing this for a while.
Yeah, the crypto community is generally pretty welcoming, I've found. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Bitcoin's crazy march, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I think the big takeaway here is that we're witnessing a major turning point in the evolution of finance. Bitcoin isn't just some niche experiment anymore. It's a real force to be reckoned with. We're seeing its influence everywhere, from presidential orders to Wall Street investments. It's something we all need to be paying attention to and understanding.
It really feels like we're watching a financial revolution happen right before our eyes. Exciting and a little bit scary all at the same time. So for our listeners who might be feeling a bit overwhelmed by all of this, what's one question they should be thinking about as they continue to explore the world of crypto?
I'd say ask yourself, how might this growing adoption of Bitcoin by governments and big institutions impact the future of our traditional financial systems? Will we see a shift toward a more decentralized and digital world? Or will the old systems adapt and find ways to coexist with these new cryptocurrencies?
That's a really interesting question to consider. It's like we're at a crossroads, and the decisions we make now will shape the financial landscape for years to come. Well, to everyone listening out there, keep exploring, stay curious, and don't be afraid to dive deeper into the world of Bitcoin and beyond. Who knows what exciting developments next month's deep dive will uncover? Until then, happy investing, or at least happy learning.